All right, well, let's get started just to keep things moving along. So I'm going to call the meeting to order. Management Committee meeting today, February 23rd, 2022. We do not need an approval of the agenda. We only have one information item. So without any objection, we'll just move on. We are not able to approve the minutes because we don't have a quorum yet, but when we do have a quorum, we'll make sure before the meeting ends today that we go back to the approval of the minutes. We have no business items. Oh, yes?
This is Dave Tyson, Office of General Counsel. You do have a
Yes.
quorum.
Oh, we do. Okay.
There are 6 members, 3 is a quorum.
Oh, wonderful.
It's 50% if it's an even numbered committee number.
Oh, well, thank you.
Thank you.
I think you lost a member, so the quorum is 3 rather than 4.
Got it.
Sorry for
Good
the
to-
interruption.
No, that's great. Good to know. All right, then. Let's go back to approval of the minutes. Everybody's been given the February 9th draft minutes of the special meeting of the Management Committee. I would entertain.
Councilmember Johnson,
Oh, do we need to do a roll call?
we do.
Sorry.
Quorum. That's okay. Thank you. So let's see. Barber.
Here.
Gonzalez.
Here.
Lilligren.
Here.
Lee. Johnson.
Here. All
Thank you.
right. Thank you very much, everybody. Now we'll move on to the approval of the minutes. So everybody's been given the draft minutes in advance to take a look at. And I would entertain a motion to approve.
Lilligren moves approval.
Moved by Lilligan. Is there a second?
So move. Oh,
Seconded
second.
by Councilmember Gonzalez. Any discussion, edits, changes? Seeing none, then we'll proceed to a vote.
Barber.
Aye.
Gonzalez.
Aye.
Lee. Lilligren.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye, and that does pass unanimously.
Thank you.
Again, no business items on this agenda, and we do have one information item. It's the Thrive Initiatives Ideas. And I'll turn this over to Marie Henderson, our Deputy Chief Financial Officer, for the presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. I am Marie Henderson, the Deputy CFO here at the Council. You may recall from our budget process and the long process that happens for our 2021 budget for spending in 2022, we set aside in the 2022 general purpose levy for Thrive initiatives. It was 3.2 million. So we are here today and staff from across the council are here to present ideas for pilot programs for this one-time money to start Thrive initiatives. They will come in and talk about each of their ideas. And if we just go to the next slide and just give you a preview of all the ideas that are going to be presented here today. Again, these are ideas and we'll be back for your approval through a budget amendment. We cannot spend this money until it goes through a budget amendment. So these are only ideas for today. You may approve or recommend, I would say, all of them, some of them you may have other ideas that you would like be brought forward. So with that, I will, you can address questions by after each idea or at the end, depending on how you'd like to run it. But for the first idea for equity audit, I will turn that over to our Deputy Regional Administrator and CFO, George Gonzalez.
Great. Take it away, George.
Chair, council members, good afternoon. So since my arrival at the council, one of the reoccurring themes that I have heard is, information with outcomes. What do we have? Specifically, what are the outcomes that we have on whatever that we're trying to do? And one of the items specifically was surrounding how do we support our female and low-income businesses, and how do we do business with them, and what outcomes that we're having with them. So with that in mind, a discussion over equity audit was discussed, I really dislike the word audit per se, because it's not really an audit of processes, but really what we discussed was to do a review more than an audit, but a review of the processes that we have when it comes to, how do we support female and minority, uh, uh, basically small businesses, and how do we do with that, and what outcomes are we having with the money that we're investing, and more importantly, are they having difficulty doing, connecting with the council, and what are some of the challenges that these small businesses have. So with that in mind, that context in mind, an equity audit per se, for lack of a better word, I think we should perform a review of, our processes to determine if and where there's gaps in the current policies that we have when we are trying to do business or trying to assist female or a small owner business, basically, with in our community. So the idea is that we connect a review throughout this year to complete roughly a fourth quarter of 2022, with an organization that actually does this for a living. This is what they do. It's a nonprofit in conjunction with the University of Minnesota, just to review our spending trends. What is it that we're spending on, and who are we connecting with, and are they having difficulty connecting with us? And essentially, the measurement here will be to find out after the review, what they say, and how can we improve our processes so we can retrain the staff on the findings, whatever that may be, and update and communicate the policies addressing any gaps that we may have and some of the challenges. And then, the number of processes that are evaluated that we currently have done, and how do we improve from there. So we need to have like a baseline so we can come back to you and say, all right, so every quarter or every year, we're going to, our goal is to spend X amount of dollars, and how are we doing quarterly? Are we meeting our goal or are we not? And just to be able to provide you with some sort of solid outcomes of what we're doing when it comes to connecting and assisting female and small business owners.
Great. Thank you for that overview. Does the committee members have any questions or thoughts on this portion of the Thrive Initiative's ideas? Any questions on this?
Madam Chair?
Councilmember Lilligren.
Thanks. It's more thoughts than questions, but thanks, George, for bringing this forward. This is work that's obviously, a priority value of this council. Well, I guess maybe I do have a question, but first I would just comment. I agree with you, George, about the term audit, and we use this a lot here. And just being a longtime government person, audit means something specific to me, and maybe strikes a little bit of fear into my heart. And so if there's a better word that we can come up with, I'm very supportive of that. And the other is, it feels like this kind of contours very close to other kinds of reviews and audits that we've done. So I'm just wondering if you could please comment on how this builds on the work that's come before.
Sure. Chair, Councilmember Lieberman, thanks for that question. Yeah, so what we're trying to do is, instead of trying to look at the whole council as an entire entity, we want to narrow the scope a little bit, specifically to maybe procurement, or, the staff is still kind of trying to decide which is the best use of these dollars to be able to provide some good reporting and some good actionable value add reporting when it comes to helping our community and our business partners that we're trying to do business with in the community. So narrowing the scope a little bit, I think it'll give us a little bit more of detail. We can expand it later, of course, but I think trying to understand like the procurement side of it, or maybe the Office of Equal Opportunity, and how do we do some of the connections that we do with the community, it will help us narrow down the scope instead of trying to fix everything. And there has been a lot of discussions on this. So I hope I answered your question, Councilmember.
Yeah, no, thanks. You did. I'm a big fan.
More narrowed.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Great question. I like the term audit, but I'm the chair of the audit committee still. So,
Oh, sir.
and
You're
I'm
prejudiced in this.
teasing a bit. The only reason I do like it is because I think there's a seriousness about the word, which kind of does strike a fear in folks. But because the topic is so serious, it doesn't bother me. But whatever you come up with, great. Are there any other questions or thoughts on this one? Councilmember Gonzalez.
Thank you very much. It's just gonna preface my question by saying that in my experience, many of the small businesses that potentially or theoretically could be bidders or vendors, they are not ready to do that yet. So I'm thinking that the scope should be more taking a step back instead of just saying why businesses are not why are not reaching out to businesses and having more diverse vendors is how can we help the vendors that exist to become ready to be at the level where they can successfully bid for services. And I'm not saying that the council should be shepherding or building up entrepreneurs or just budding businesses along the way, but that should be part of the process. And we had discussions on this in the past with the EAC and with the BIPOC group as to how we can connect businesses that are just starting or even entrepreneurs who had the idea of starting a business, how we can tell them this is the steps that you need to take. And when you are at this level, then you'll be ready to bid or take advantage of our processes. So that's a long way of saying that I think that the audit or the review should also include those steps to get the businesses ready, so then they can become they can use our programs, etc. Because I know for a fact that there's many businesses out there, but the ones that are right now ready to be vendors, it's a small group of small minority of the whole universe of potential businesses. So thank you.
Those are really some great comments. Are there any other comments, questions? I would just add to what Councilmember Gonzalez said, and it's kind of on the same line. I was thinking as you're doing the audit or the review, checking in with those businesses that either are able to participate with us now through procurement or haven't been able to, maybe to Councilmember Gonzalez's point, what are those barriers? So I know we can hear from staff. Staff certainly is finding out barriers along the way, but getting that input from folks that are trying to get into our process. I know every now and then we'll get emails from people who are super frustrated because there will be a piece, that a requirement or a something, and they just can't seem to break through that barrier. So if we can discover some of that stuff, I think that's where you're trying to go in this work. That'd be great. Okay, so this would take us through Q4 of 2022, $250,000 spend, and I'm hearing some good feedback on this. And George, do you need anything else from us on this? Any other questions or thoughts that you might have come up with these comments?
Chair and council members, no, I think thank you, Councilmember Gonzalez, for the feedback. I 100% agree with you. I think we need to peel back that onion and understand what some of the barriers are coming in. This is great stuff. I'm looking forward to be able to provide some good value add data so we can really understand what are some of the gaps and how do we improve that. And more importantly, the outcomes as we move forward, not just for this particular process, but I just wanted to make mention that as we move forward, that's one of my to-dos for as we continue to understand and learn about the council, is I want to be able to provide the council members with outcome-driven data and information. I think it's really important to have, and we're creating this. It's going to take a little bit of time, so I need your support in this. But a really easy to navigate and understand dashboard with easy to click information. If you want more, here you go. But really an easy to understand dashboard so you guys can see the outcome and of all of the important goals and that we have that we're working on how do we move forward. And then I think having that will be very, very beneficial, not just for the council, but actually for everyone to kind of easy and understand. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of background of what I'm working on. It's going to take a little time to develop, but we will get there.
Wonderful. And I like the idea of the dashboard too, where you can dive deeper for more information, and in that disaggregated data is where we really find some of the bigger disparities too. So if we can have the big picture, but also have that ancillary important information, that'd be great. All right, seeing no other discussion on this, let's move on to the next part of the presentation, LHIA Affordable Home Ownership Pilot. Hi, Tara, welcome.
Hi, thank you, Chair Johnson. Council members, happy to be here. Little bit of background. The Local Housing Incentives Account is the program within the suite of Livable Communities Act programs that is explicitly for the creation and preservation of affordable housing. Since LCA has existed since the mid-90s, we have always pooled our LHIA funds with Minnesota Housing's Consolidated Request for Proposals, their annual partner RFP that includes multiple funding sources. In 2020, we started analyzing and doing some data analysis and research on the outcomes of the single family awards we've been making through LHIA over the years. And we did find some disparities in terms of where awards were being made in the region. And we also we're reviewing some of the strategic goals of the council for 2020 through 2022, including reducing racial disparities in home ownership. And so that culminated in a good 18 months of additional data work and many stakeholder conversations, many internal conversations, lots of kind of testing ideas and honing in on the details. As we sit right now, there is a CDC approved recommendation for the council to approve a pilot LHIA program for 2022 that would be administered directly by the council for single family or home ownership opportunities only. And that those awards would focus on two specific priorities. One, increasing geographic choice in home ownership and increasing access to home ownership in populations that are underserved that have much lower home ownership rates than white homeowners. And so that is essentially the creation of that essentially is the LHIA Affordable Homeownership Pilot. And we've been doing some kind of, back of the envelope work and conversations with potential applicants to try to assess what the right amount of money to make available would be for the pilot program. For those of you that don't know, the LHIA account only gets $1.5 million a year in base funding, and that's been a static number since 1995. So you can imagine how much less far the dollar goes. And luckily, we have often been able to augment those funds with either reserves in the LCA accounts or additional allocations from the council out of their various strategic initiatives like we did last year. And that is wonderful. And that is what we're hoping we can fund the LHIA Affordable Homeownership Pilot with. We think that we could, reasonably get applications upwards of $1 to $2 million in potential awards. What we normally fund through the Minnesota Housing Consolidated RFP in a given year for homeownership applications is usually somewhere around $500,000 to $1 million. But again, we've done a lot of work, especially with communities that are not comfortable or haven't participated in the Minnesota Housing's request for proposals about interest. And we are hopeful that we could get interest upwards of $1 million. And so to really test the pilot without impacting the regular LHIA program, because we do still intend to pool dollars with Minnesota Housing for multifamily awards and can even still award single family awards through that process if we choose with our regular LHIA money. To test the pilot out, we're asking for these Thrive Initiative funds so that we can do so without taking any money out of the regular LHIA program and see if it does what we're hoping it does and if it has the interest that we are hoping it has. So that is the reason for the request. LHIA is an annual grant program, and we would be taking applications in fall and bringing recommendations forward in probably around November of 2022 and making those awards before the end of the year, and would certainly be able to report back on the number of applications, the number of units funded, the number of units sold to a household that represents a population that is has lower homeownership rates than whites, so that we could share both for ourselves and our own evaluation plans for the pilot and with you all, how the money furthered equity and furthered other Thrive initiatives. So I'll stop there unless Lisa wants to add anything, Director Barajas, or if anyone has any questions, I'm more than happy to take them.
Great. Lisa, do you have anything you want to add?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nope, Tara covered everything. Thank you.
Great. All right, we'll turn it back to the committee. Are there any questions or thoughts or comments that you'd like to add on this homeownership pilot program?
I just have
Madam Chair?
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go for it, Deb. No, you.
I was just going to
Councilmember
ask,
Barber.
this is a different, thank you, Madam Chair, a different program than last year, but can you remind me how much we used out of this funds for the Livable Communities program last year versus, I guess, this one? I just don't remember.
But Madam Chair, Councilmember Barber, this committee recommended and the council approved an additional $4 million, doubling our LHIA award for 2021. And we later today, the council will be hearing the LHIA recommendations. Every penny of that $8 million was spent, and there were still 39 applications for the metro area through the consolidated RFP that were not funded by either Minnesota Housing or LHIA. So those extra dollars were amazing and put to good use, and unfortunately still don't even come close to addressing the need.
Great, thank you.
Yep. Councilmember Lilligren.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. And Tara, just a question about as we increase our funding toward the Minnesota Housing Consolidated RFP with LHIA, I'm just wondering, do we get a bang for the buck? What kind of influence or impact do we have on what Minnesota Housing Consolidated RFP looks like? And does our increased participation increase our voice there?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Lilligren, that's a great question. It's been something that has been, I think, evolving over the last couple years. I've really tried in my 2.5 years in this role to increase the engagement that the council has in the consolidated RFP process and have more ahead of the process conversations with Minnesota Housing staff, who have been wonderful to work with, about the priorities we'd like to see and the things in the application that help us do our evaluation. And there's a really important reason. I don't know if this is embedded anywhere in your question or not, but there's a really important reason why we're recommending this pilot or excited about trying a pilot for single family but not multifamily. And it kind of has to do with just how much more complex and how many more units we're talking about and how many more millions of dollars are going out the door for multifamily. That kind of streamlining and looking at where our dollars can augment and stretch and fund something they can't fund or not fund something they, et cetera, is really valuable, currently to continue to partner with them, and with the ability to fund smaller scale projects, 1 or 2 units here or there with a smaller community, possibly that isn't used to these big funding application processes. The pilot could be a little bit more manageable, but yes, we have definitely worked with Minnesota Housing staff. I mean, it's their baby and they're big and they're a beast, right? And they've got the tens of millions of dollars in that consolidated fund to certainly justify a very robust and a very explicit process that addresses their priorities. Sometimes our priorities are a little bit different. We're looking at the region, they're looking at the state. We have this deep embedded local knowledge through comp plan processes about housing needs in a real nuanced way. And so sometimes there are times where we have conversations with them where we're interested in a project, maybe based on a geographic difference or affordability level that is more nuanced for us, seems like a really good fit. So I guess I'm kind of getting long-winded here, but yes, we have a great partner with them. They have been very open to hearing our suggestions and ideas about ways to get our priorities and needs met. At the end of the day, it is still essentially their process, and we are to some extent limited in their selections with what we can do. But we've been pushing on that, and they've been amenable to that.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Great question. Any other questions, comments? I can't see everybody, so if you have something to say, just go ahead. I think the only thing, again, Tara, on the amount, so this is a flex amount that you're looking for between approximately 1 and 2 million. You're not looking for an amount that we should pick between, but that's just kind of where you're seeing it might fall, correct?
Right, Madam Chair, the 2 million is what I'd really love and think we could spend. The 1 million is sort of saying less than that, and I'm not sure the staff time and effort is going to be worth the few amount of awards we could make. So that's why there's a range there, but essentially the ask is 2 million.
Great.
Thanks for the chance to clarify that.
Yep, for sure. All right, anything else on this proposal? All right, great job, Tara. I know some of us have seen this in various iterations, depending on if we're in the policy work group or CDC, but really good work behind this, and appreciate it and look forward to it going forward this year. So thank you for that. All right, let's move on to our next item. We're going to turn you over to Metro Transit for the Light Rail Vehicle Technician Pathway Program. And Brian, are you going to present on this?
Yeah, Madam Chair and Management Committee Council members, I am Brian Funk. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at Metro Transit. I'll provide a brief overview. Both of our sponsors, Ed Meyer and Aaron Koski, are on the line as well, so I'll ask them to join in if we get into some more details. However, what we are looking at today is a light rail vehicle technician pathway program. And this will be a program that's in partnership with ATU Local 1005. I don't see them on the line yet, but we did have a very good meeting this morning to identify some of the partnership opportunities that we have, so we're able to work together really to develop the framework for a program that can be built into our system for the long haul. And so we currently have a need, and we expect future needs in the vehicle technician area, specifically for light rail. This money that we're seeking for the first year would really allow us to get the additional staff engaged and start to work on the program development so that we're able to set up that framework and begin recruitment and implementation near the end of this year or early in 2023. We know from a presentation that I was part of last year that we're able to do this. We had a similar program for a bus maintenance technician program. That's continued to advance. We're having some good success in that area and getting a lot closer to being able to go out for recruitment. And so with that, we believe that it's well supported. Again, we don't have all of the answers for exactly how the particulars are going to work, but we know that there are interested parties that are current employees as well as people in the community who would have a really good opportunity to start down this workforce development program. And so I'll see if Ed or Aaron would like to add anything before turning it back to the committee.
Would either of you like to add anything to the presentation?
No, thanks for that overview, Brian. I'm good. This is Ed.
This is Aaron. Very well said, Brian.
Great. And I do want to thank Brian and Wes, and then as well, you remember from our last meeting, Mr. Timlin and Mr. Kamuller came before us on this item as we thought we might get this presentation at our last meeting. But we did have a good meeting this morning, and I think it's a good step forward. And I think for the moment, they seem to agree in concept of where this is going. So I just wanted to close the loop on that for everybody who was at the meeting where they did speak to us about this item. I thought it was a great meeting altogether, and look forward to next steps on this. I think we've started to lay out kind of some groundwork and next steps with them as well. All right, any questions on this? Comments, thoughts from the committee? Councilmember Lilligren and then Barber.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks. And I'm super supportive of creating pathways, especially to these kinds of jobs that we need. And it's a pretty good job for folks. And so I'm excited about something like this. My comment, and then I'll follow up with a question, is that I understand the scope of the work in developing this legacy model that we can really embed within our systems. It just doesn't seem like a lot of money to do something that big, and I get it, we're just trying to spend for the well, I guess for a year. And so I'm just wondering if Mr. Funk or anybody has a comment on that? And is partnership with the ATU local, is that a cost sharing partnership, or what does the partnership look like? Thanks.
Brian, go ahead.
Madam Chair and Councilmember Lilligren, a really good question, and I'll ask maybe Aaron to add to my comments. But on the first note, we do recognize that this is a pretty modest amount of money, but given our experience in this space, we think that this is something, given, we'll continue to seek council approval, budget amendment. We'll have not a full year of opportunity to get a person on board, the designated resource. We do have internal staff resources to be able to get started absent the funding. And so that is a commitment, should this project be selected, that was made to ATU, is that once council action is taken, that we're able to get started right away, so that we aren't waiting on that. And I'm not sure, Aaron, if you wanted to describe anything else about some of our conversations on the funding size.
No, Brian, I'll only just say that, Madam Chair, Councilmember Lilligren, you're exactly correct in the amount of effort and heavy lift will be required to launch a legacy program. This $90,000 does not represent the administration execution of the program, but simply to help us make sure we have the best tools available to construct the correct pathway. I think there are multiple opportunities, philanthropic, private, public, to fund these type of efforts, and we look to leverage those opportunities as well.
Thank you.
And Madam Chair and Councilmember Lilligren, one more item I'll mention is that because of some work that had been done leading up to this proposal, we do have a good idea of sort of base level curriculum and some other transit agencies that we've participated in consortiums with. And so it won't be entirely from the ground up, but we just need to spend the time to make sure that it's being developed in partnership, like we said, with ATU Local 1005. And to answer the second question, at this time, there's not a cost sharing partnership that we're working with. We envision funding this at this point.
Great. Sounds good. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to put out a voice for support of this. This type of program has been so successful in our bus operations and has been really critical to not only providing new opportunities, but for us to really build sort of that specialized workforce. And so it's really a key kind of building block in building a sustainable workforce. So I'm really glad we were able to kind of work through any concerns or considerations on this to get this item in front of us. So I would hope you would all help support this.
Great. Any other discussion on this? Questions? I would just second what everybody has said here. I think it's a really good start to a program that's going to help us, get people trained up into good careers and also work to meet our workforce needs that are very serious right now, but building a program that eventually can lead into perhaps something else would be wonderful. So good work on this and look forward to more information as it rolls through the official process when we bring it to council. All right, thanks, Brian. Appreciate it. Let's move on now to our equity evaluation of regional transportation and investment study.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Charles, go ahead.
I want to make sure you can hear me okay. Okay, so 2022 is really a year in MTS where we're setting the foundation for the next transportation policy plan. And within that, we have a few really significant opportunities for studies that we're proposing here and that we're executing outside of these requests. Within this, kind of focusing on these three today, what these things will allow the council to do is to really gather a lot more information about how really important topics, and the things we're focused on are equity, climate, and some pretty significant changes in travel demand and both by mode, but also just, in broader society, how those will contribute to the next regional transportation policy plan. The investment opportunity we have with these is to both grow the scope of existing efforts, but then also to begin some work that may become more significant over the next couple of years as well. So we'll walk through these, and I'll note Amy Venowitz is also on the line for any questions, particularly about this first one. So last year, the council put money into this equity evaluation of regional transportation investment. And the base of that work is looking at a lot of different types of projects and evaluating where equity fits into those and where project decisions could be made to increase equity or the outcomes from those projects. So that work is moving forward. That work is funded. As we went through the process of developing that scope, we actually identified some additional opportunities to do even more and to have better input along the way. So what this investment would do is add work tasks within that study project to first expand the scope. So the consultant would recruit and select actually a policy group that would assist the study. So this would be a more intensive effort than we could do with existing policy groups, and it would allow us to have additional outside perspectives in addition to just our consultants' expertise as we're guiding the work forward. So it'd be a way to broaden the effort. It would also enable us to train council and partner agency staff in what the findings are and what this tool that we're developing in this project is, so we could expand the reach of the project beyond what it would do otherwise. It'd also be developing kind of a communication plan to roll that out. So what is this tool? What are the findings, and how can communities and council staff use it as we're evaluating potential investments in transportation projects? And then finally, could create a dashboard to actually show how it's working, to show what the measurements are and the results and process along the way. So that's a quick overview of the first one. Again, the base work of the project is beginning, but this is an opportunity to really expand this and make it even more useful and demonstrate its results through this additional scope.
Are there any questions from the committee on this? Comments, thoughts? Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick comment on this one too. This has been a project that got kicked off through this process last year. And as you know, we didn't fund the whole amount at that time, and we've learned more over this year. To me, this is something that we talk a lot about equity in transit investment and transit development, but sometimes we forget some of the big dollars that can really be associated with transportation investment and some of the equity impacts for how we invest dollars in building out the transportation system. I really appreciate the work that we're doing with not just only us and through the TAB and regional solicitation process, but I can see it helping with other partner agencies as sort of a framework of how you make these smart investments while making sure you're strongly considering the equity and the impacts on the communities as well. So it's something I'm very much in support of. So. Thank
you. Councilmember Lilligren.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Charles, for the presentation. And it's not surprising to see you requesting additional funds this year, since, as Councilmember Barber said, we reduced the request amount last year. So congratulations on the work done so far and on what you're looking forward to do. And my question is specific to the equity policy group. And I guess a couple questions. One is, who do we imagine would be on that group? And then also, does the project budget anticipate some kind of stipending or compensating the participants in the group? Because often, especially when we're seeking equity voices within conversations like this, there are economic barriers to participating as well. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Councilmember and Madam Chair. I might defer to Amy Venowitz, who's closer to the details on this and could provide a response.
Sure, thanks, Charles, Madam Chair and Councilmember Lilligren. One of the things we learned through the process this year is that how the policy group is formed and run, really, we need to be somewhat hands-off. And that is partly, well, not partly, all because we are anticipating that we will be paying the policy group members. So we are committed to paying them for their time. We are reimbursing them for their travel and daycare expenses. And the council itself does not have the authority to do that. So as part of this study, that is a major task that we are asking the consultant to undertake on our behalf, but the decision-making will be by the consultant. It's actually a team of consultants that we do not yet have under contract, so I can't divulge the anticipated team at this time. And what we learned through the scoping and proposal process is that the work that is going to be required to do that really was more extensive than we were anticipating. And we are, as staff, we will give them advice on how to advertise for potential members, different types of groups that we would like to see represented. We are committed to a majority of people of color representation, not just majority, but probably almost all of the members. But at this point in time, it really is going to be a back and forth with the consultant to identify how we essentially recruit and advertise for these positions and then eventually get them on board. So that's about what I can tell you on that. I forgot the second question you had.
I think you kind of hit it, Amy. I was asked who was going to be on there and will they be compensated.
Oh,
I think
okay.
you kind of hit both of those. So thanks. And Madam Chair and to the team, I commend you for this approach for working out of the box and through our partners to figure out how to get the highest caliber of people on this policy group and then to compensate them for that. And so, well done. Thanks.
Thank you. I might just add one additional thing. So we did get the funding for this last year, and at this point in time, only a small amount has been spent. And we spent that money with the Alliance to help us actually do the scoping for this work. And all along the way, both with the Alliance and other groups that we interacted with on the scope, we learned a lot about the policy group itself. And the emphasis really was on do that piece of it right. Make sure that you really empower this group to be the decision-making group, and make sure that you also build in time at the beginning to get the group to kind of gel and act as a cohesive group and get to know one another. And so that added some additional time to the totality of the project too. But just thinking about the scope and how we're going to be approaching having this group be the decision maker was very interesting and learning process over the past year.
Great. Thanks for sharing that, Amy. It sounds like it was great learning and you're applying it very well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Are there any other comments, thoughts, questions on this? All right, seeing none. Appreciate this really thorough presentation, the additional information that you're bringing forward. Yeah, I don't think there's anything else. Charles, did you have anything else you wanted to wrap up on this?
Not on this one. Thank you.
Okay, great. We can move on to the next one then.
Okay, so the next one, Madam Chair, is another MTS effort. This is a more technical effort than the previous one. So we are at the point now where we are receiving very robust information from our travel behavior inventory. And this project proposal is actually a way to leverage some of that data and to develop some estimates of how vehicle miles traveled, which MnDOT is paying closer and closer attention to, and the council may as well, may shift over time as a way to both reduce greenhouse gases and other benefits of VMT reduction. So one of the things that's been talked about at times in terms of reducing VMT is the idea of changing modes. So biking or walking instead of driving, or using transit instead of driving. The thing that this project would look at is using some of the real data from the travel behavior inventory. What volume of trips might be feasible or realistic to set, and the goal of this work is really to kind of estimate what the maximum shift would be. So a best case scenario in terms of mode shift is what this would get after, but again, grounded in the real world data from the travel behavior inventory. So this project would develop a tool that enables us to communicate to different communities or different community types what that possible realm of mode shift may be, and then it would help the council identify data and then perhaps adopt targets for VMT reduction based on knowing what the maximum is, what may be a realistic number, and then to use and communicate that so the council could share that information with our local partners as we were advancing planning and inform this to future investment decisions as well. I guess I'll ask Amy if there's any additional points to share on this one, and then Madam Chair, open it to council members.
I think you covered it. The one piece I will add is another major way to reduce VMT, of course, is teleworking, telecommuting. And we're kind of setting that piece of this aside and just looking at if the piece that we're focusing on is how to shift modes, what is the maximum VMT reduction we might achieve? And the telecommuting we're going to be addressing through our travel demand management study, which we have a consultant undergoing as we speak. So that's a different effort.
Great. I think that was a good point to make because I was wondering that as well. We know with the new, as we continue to go through the pandemic and the shift in work patterns, how that played into this. So that was a good clarification. Thank you for that. Are there any other questions or comments on this from the committee? Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Also do support this one, but I do have a question actually as well on it. So to my fellow council members, was a very long discussion prior to the release of the regional solicitation at TAB this year about whether we needed to start shifting funding modes. And, because there's a balance between funding of expansion of roads and spot mobility and whether transit or bike or ped or those types of things. Either finally to Charles, do you see something this sort of work with this real world data being used as we look back at this? As we just released the solicitation without broad changes, but there's definitely a desire to look at it next time. Would this help inform some of those decisions as we look back at this round?
Yeah, Madam Chair and Councilmember Barber, I believe it would. I mean, I think this type of information would help kind of share the outer benefit of perhaps an increased investment in other modes. Ultimately it'd be TAB and the council making the decision over investment by mode through the regional solicitation process, but having more information about the effect of investment in transit, bike, and walking, I think would be helpful and informative in making the investment criteria as well.
A follow-up. Thank you, Madam Chair. This is more of a comment. So I think that is, having more information at our hands is really helpful. We did have really good discussions about things at TAB, but it was a lot about how people felt we should start changing things versus what we're actually seeing. And I think, having some more data can help drive those decisions and, hopefully help move things that align with both TAB's vision and with our vision. So it could be a good help for us.
Thank you. Councilmember Lilligren.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Charles and Amy. And Amy, I want to thank you for referencing telecommuting, and I get that telecommuting is not part of this specific project, but I am encouraged that we are talking about it in the framework of transportation investment. And I was just remembering back, and I can't remember what the 4 T's stood for, but I remember back in my time on the Minneapolis City Council, there were federal funds that came to address some of the congestion mitigation and air quality issues. And one of the T's was telecommuting. And I remember at the time saying in our public forums and privately that this is the first time I've ever seen that really bracketed with transportation and transit investment. And so I was very encouraged to see that, and not surprisingly, that was like this pittance amount of the overall federal spend, but at least it was something, right? And so I'm glad we're doing that, because I think the impacts of telecommuting, especially post-COVID, are going to be, you know, significant in our transportation systems. And so that leads me to, I have 2 questions, please. And I'm just wondering now, in this day and age, how, when we look at VMT reduction and reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, what impact electric vehicles may be having on how we approach this kind of study. And then the other is in how sort of COVID or post-COVID or whatever we're in, how the current environment impacts a study like this, just because it's so different than it was, say, 5 years ago, 3 years ago. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. To Councilmember Lilligren, to the first point, you know, I think the vehicle propulsion type isn't really part of the purview of what we're anticipating with this. There's other work, our electric vehicle work and other efforts that are funded already are looking at the greenhouse gas effects of different vehicle propulsion. I think in this case, it's really about shifting modes outside of a personal vehicle into transit, bike, or walking, and what are the VMT effects of that. To the second question, I might see if Amy has a thought on the COVID or wherever we are now effects of our current data.
So I had a barking dog here, so I might have missed the second question. I do want to add on the first question with the electric vehicles. So electric vehicles don't really reduce VMT. They do allow us to drive without greenhouse gas emissions and reducing our emissions. So that's a very great positive point of electric vehicles. And we are just now completing a study on how to accelerate electric vehicle adoption in the Twin Cities region. I'm not sure if that has been in front of the Transportation Committee. Well, you're not on the Transportation Committee yet. I don't think it's been in front of the full council. So we could bring that forward, or I can send you something through email. That study has a number of strategies and recommendations on how we as the council and partnering with MnDOT can increase adoption of electrification, not just of the transit fleet, but of the privately owned fleet throughout the region. So that was the focus of that study. And then I'll let you tell me your second question.
Yeah, thanks. And I might actually have a follow-up on that one. But my second one was about how COVID impacts or post-COVID era or whatever, and how that might affect this project, this modeling project. It seems like we're in such a different place than we were 3 years ago. That are we starting at a different baseline? Is there some impact on this?
Sure. Within this project, the data that we're going to be using is actually the 2019 travel behavior inventory data. So that was pre-COVID. And so what we will be doing with that data is essentially putting rules around trip making and saying every trip less than 5 miles could be made with a bike. And then we'll calculate how much VMT that would reduce. Or every trip less than a mile could be a walking trip. And then we'll calculate how many miles that would be reduced. Now, of course, we'll never shift all of those trips, but it essentially will give us a good benchmark of, if we could, what is the maximum VMT we could ever hope to reduce through mode shift. So it is pre-COVID data, and I think one of the interesting things we could see is how does that compare to how VMT did reduce during COVID, and you know, likely most of that VMT reduction was not mode shift, it was probably telecommuting, but we can kind of take the 2 sets of data and compare them across one another. Does that answer your question?
Cool. Yeah, it does. Thanks, Amy. So it's not, it's looking at the trip essentially and the mode used on the trip, not sort of looking at the all the trips combined. So that is helpful. And I guess I'll just kind of defer the EV conversation a bit. It's just interesting. I mean, I know we have other studies going on at other places. It'll be interesting to see how all of these studies kind of intersect and can sort of support each other. If the goal in mode shift is greenhouse gas emission, it just seems like there's going to be something new to learn, as it seems like we're more rapidly transitioning to electric vehicles than I think most of us thought we would be doing. So cool. Looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Lilligren. Are there other questions or comments? So I have one, and again, it's with complete support of the spirit and intent of all of this, but you know, from somebody who represents communities where there aren't as many opportunities for transit, although, you know, it includes walking and biking. But if the goal of this is to help potentially shift where funds then are applied towards infrastructure and modes, is the intent then to move money away from roads and bridges? Would it be only for new construction, or would it also potentially be reconstruction and maintenance? And the only reason I say this, and maybe I'm off in my thinking here, but you know, just maintaining our infrastructure, we're just so woefully behind. And certainly the ultimate goal would be to move away from the need for those physical, you know, infrastructure such as, you know, roads and bridges, but they're still very critical. So I know this is early thinking in getting us to where we ultimately want to be, but you know, I just know that there are people so desperate, and a lot of them I think sit on tab. Councilmember Barber's the expert on that, but you know, people get nervous the minute, oh my God, the council's doing what? And I lived through some of that, you know, as I was trying to fight for a third lane on 494 for many, many years. So I just want to make clear, you know, the ultimate goal I think is laudable, but it doesn't negate the fact that we have a lot of infrastructure out there that is already deteriorating, and there's, you know, sharp competition for limited dollars as it is. So I don't even think I'm asking a question, but if you can reflect on my concern, that'd be great.
Madam Chair, if I could, and then I'll turn it over to them. What you're highlighting is exactly the conversation that takes place at TAB, and it's right. You know, right now we haven't fundamentally changed anything for this cycle. I mean, there's always, every cycle, there's changes on the edges and some changes in scoring and things like that. You know, but I think you know, everyone sees and feels what they see in their district, their area, all of that. But anything that can help us inform data with data helps us decide, and whether we change something dramatically or we don't change something. To me, it's having an understanding of how some of these things might change, and VMT is a measure that's being used more and more. And I think that even as we come back post-COVID, VMT in general is going to change, because you're not going to necessarily find community, even if people don't full on stay teleworking, the likelihood that a lot of workers are going to work flex schedules and things like that. So there's long-term impacts. And if we can set out with some good data like this to start with, and so we can figure out as we go forward that sort of ongoing balance between roads and bridges and transit and the other modes to make sure that we're investing in the right places. I don't think its intent is to move from one to another, but it's to understand, make sure we have a full understanding of the system, because in these conversations, a lot of times you start, even though they're real technical matters, you start talking almost from an emotional perspective. So the more data we have to inform, I think that helps us make better decisions.
If I could add, Madam Chair, just quickly, this study is really meant not to help us with our decision making, but the big decision makers on bike and walking infrastructure in particular are the cities and counties. So this data is meant to help them think about where and how do we need infrastructure to help these short local trips. And so giving them the ability to see how many trips and what impact shifting those trips might have on VMT is a really powerful tool to help them think about how they invest their local funds, not necessarily the council's funding.
I really appreciate that clarification. Thank you, Councilmember Barber. And thank you, Amy. That gives me kind of the bigger picture. And you're right. I mean, I've sat in many meetings at a city council where we're trying to get a bike lane and it's a split vote and it doesn't happen. So the roads get wider and, then we're complaining about cars driving too fast. And, to have this data would be really useful because otherwise we're kind of shooting from the hip or the heart, whichever it is. And not always good policy comes from that. So this is great. Are there any other questions or comments on this? All right, seeing none, very good work on this. And we have one more to go. Regional Fleet Zero Bus Infrastructure Evaluation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the last one from the MTS list of requests actually builds upon really great work that Metro Transit did in the zero emission bus transition plan. So the Metro Transit plan included, analysis of service, evaluation of facilities, and consideration of utility infrastructure to implement zero emission buses. And so a lot of those lessons and a lot of that information could actually be applied very efficiently to the regional fleet. So the 1,150 buses or so that MTS operates or owns in partnership with the suburban transit providers, we could take a lot of those lessons and actually apply that to the regional fleet, and then very efficiently come up with adaptation of that plan for kind of the balance of the council's bus fleet. And so this work would do just that. We'd contract under a master contract work order with the same consultant effectively to apply that same evaluation and come up with a non-Metro Transit bus fleet zero emission bus transition plan. What that enables us to do is move strategically forward for electric bus pilots. So where might the council see better return or better outcome for the kind of non-Metro Transit electric bus deployments over time? Selecting those in consideration, especially of the infrastructure components of zero emission bus, really sets us up to succeed in those first pilots and then to successfully transition the fleet over time and inform the policy decisions that would back that up. So this would be a extension of work already completed to the MTS side of the fleet.
Great. Are there any questions, comments? Councilmember Barber?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this is fantastic that you can roll this, especially under the master contract. When we're talking with any of our contractors and or the suburban transit providers, they have the same concerns that we had going into the zero emission bus discussion about what infrastructure is needed and things like that, and the impacts on the electric grid. But I think they also have a great desire to start implementing some of this technology. So anything we can do to help with that, I think would be just really, really good for the region. And I think our partners would really appreciate it.
Great. Any other comments? Councilmember Lilligren.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. And I agree with everything Councilmember Barber just said. I think this is really interesting. It's a great step forward. And I just have a comment, and this may be more for my council committee colleagues here, but just to say it, and in my world, I kind of hear from two different sides, but most about the pace in which we're implementing a zero emissions fleet. And so I hear from the advocates, the general message is we're not moving fast enough, right? And so I hear it from the advocates in my district. I also hear it from the legislators in my district. And so I'm kind of just musing or pondering what kind of sort of public relations traction that we got. I just think it's important for us to be communicating outward that we're doing something, because I think there's this sense, or at least in my district, I hear a lot that we're not doing enough, we're not doing anything. So yeah, just kind of put that out there that if we're going to invest like this, I feel like we should get a little bit of loving from the community. Thanks.
Councilmember Barber, did you want to respond?
Yeah, I can respond a bit. So our zero emissions bus plan did go to the legislature last week, which is good. And it really is a good first step. But what I really appreciated about it was because it's hard, from my perspective of I just like the advocates, I'd love to be all electric tomorrow, but there's realities both not only with funding, but like things like the electric grid infrastructure and other things that need to be considered. Now, are there investments like when we look at like federal infrastructure bills or things like that that could help with that? Possibly, but at least now back to my prior argument, now we have the data to be able to make that argument. If you invest X more in this type of infrastructure, we can grow our zero emissions bus fleet faster or something like that. But having that sort of framework, at least the understanding, which I don't think we had until we really went through this process with the zero emissions bus plan, because the infrastructure itself would cost more. We knew there would be impacts on the electric grid, but we really couldn't articulate it in the right way. And I think now we can, but we also know the places where investment might help us move faster. So, and that's why I like this, because we learned a lot in the process, and this is a way for us to pass it on to some of our partners as well. And hopefully it could be something that we could even unite a little bit more with the suburban providers to say, hey, we want to go faster on this, but this is what the state needs to be able to do that.
Thank you.
But I also hear all the time that we should do it faster. So I would love to, but there's a lot of factors.
Any other questions, comments on this? I just have one, and this is probably in the weeds, and so if it, just don't even bother answering if it is. But, so suburban providers, they have reserves, and I'm just wondering, would they be able to, for charging stations and stuff like that, would that qualify for some of the reserve money that they have? Because I know that's for buses and infrastructure and things like that. That's an in the weeds question, I'm sure. I mean, it's just interesting because cost does drive how fast we can switch things over, right? And we have to have all that infrastructure in place.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I mean, certainly cost is a factor and where funds might come from are factors, but I think, some of our first items, as it might relate to council operated service, we don't own any of our own garages. I'm not talking about the suburban providers, but just the council itself. So if the payback on electrification is over a certain time period, how do we invest that when we only have service contract that may be 5 years long? And so those are the kinds of questions, those are the kinds of lessons that we'd be applying. I think that sort of sets up a next phase of, okay, we'll identify where it makes sense to go first. How might we pay for that? I think that would really come from the next phase.
Great. Great. Thank you very much. Any other items on this report? No? All right. So we've got 2 more to go. So I'll turn it over now. Environmental Services is up next. And who have we got on this one reporting today? Jen? Yeah, a little faint, but I think so.
Hi, my apologies. So I'm Jen Zukowski. I'm the Senior Manager of Workforce and Equity in Environmental Services. I have 2 proposals or ideas. One, we started last year with trying to build a career skills program, and as we were interacting with the community and really trying to find out what are the needs within the community. We know what we need in the council and environmental services, but what can we offer to the community? We expanded the program. So we went from youth to BIPOC, female, people with disabilities, and people who have had interactions with the criminal justice system. And we're collaborating with our local unions. St. Paul Technical College actually offers a wastewater treatment program where folks will be able to get a scholarship to go to that program. They'll get their wastewater treatment license, and they'll do on-the-job training in environmental services. So that's really exciting. We plan to partner with, at least in this pilot, we've been working with the Ethiopian community of Minnesota. They have youth immigrants. Damascus Way is a reentry program for men. They also have a sister organization that works with women, so we plan to incorporate that as well at some point. Project Search with Deed works with people with disabilities, so we've engaged them as well. And so the purpose is to develop this really, truly diverse pipeline and expose folks to careers in plant operations, so as plant operators and interceptor service workers. And I do have, I'm not sure if Craig Edlin's on the line, but I know Bert Tracy is. So I've been working with the other areas of our division, as these have been positions where we've had retirements. We're also seeing that, you know, typical to some of these trades and operations positions, people just aren't aware of what's out there. Wastewater treatment isn't always glamorous, but I think when they come into the organization, they learn about environmental services and they learn about the work, they're really excited about the opportunities and, you know, the career stability and things like that. So that is our first proposal. The funding on it and what we've been doing is kind of low. So we would be welcome to any additional funds that may become available or suggested, but we wanted to at least be able to expand upon the program, and we're hoping to get started. March is when St. Paul Tech is going to be offering some classes, so ES would have to do some stuff on the front end, what have you. Our measurements would be the number of folks from the targeted categories that I mentioned that would be completing the programs and moving into regular positions. And one other thing that we really wanted to highlight is the satisfaction of our community partners, right? Equity is truly engaging, and it's not just looking at what do we need as a council, it's what does the region need? And let's go out and ask them. And then, are you happy with the services? And this has been a collaborative process. So they've been able to give us feedback, and we've been able to, you know, co-develop this program together. I'm complete on that one. And Bert, did you have anything you want to add? And I didn't see Craig on the line, but.
I do not have anything to add, Madam Chair, committee members. Thank you. Jen, you did a great job covering it. If there's any questions, I'll do what I can to help answer them. I'm out. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First off, let me say I love all the workforce development programs and ideas that have been presented. I think it's such a critical way to try and be ahead of things. Now, if I recall, didn't we launch this last year? And then how, like originally, and then how did it go at first? And then, especially given like the current workforce trends and the really tightening of the labor market in general?
Sure. We weren't able to launch it. There was a lot more planning that we needed. And so as we were starting to launch it, that's when it expanded. And we realized that there were a lot more critical needs and it was going to cost more. And so we feel like we're in a much better place because that, you know, the community engagement really, really amped up the program. And so they're going to be offering mentorship and support to help make people help in the success. The candidates are also going to receive the same benefits as any other student at St. Paul Technical College, so tutoring and things like that. So these were things that we were able to add on to the program. We just didn't want to throw something out there and hope that it worked. So this is far more expanded from what we originally anticipated.
Perfect. Thank you. I do like the broader based approach, which is really, I would say that's how even the bus mechanic program evolved as well. I think that, you know, once you go out and start talking to people, you'll find out sort of what people really need and what resources they actually need to be successful in these programs. So yeah, no, that's very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on this? Seeing none. Great report. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to seeing the great strides that we'll see coming out of this one as well. And with that, we've got one more item, again from Environmental Services Apprenticeship Program for the painters.
Yes. So another one focusing on trades. In our painters area, we lack BIPOC employees. I mean, we do a decent job, but we want to increase BIPOC women, veterans, and again, people with disabilities. And the type of painting that we do is industrial coating, and a lot of times people are not familiar with this particular type of painting. So we've actually had a meeting with the union to talk about bringing in 2 painters, and we specifically have that targeted population. These folks will have experience in a different realm of painting, won't have the wastewater facilities or the industrial, and so we'll be able to work with them through that, but also giving them exposure to who we are as an organization, our culture, because a lot of times, you know, folks, again, they don't know about our organization. And so we've had other successful apprenticeship programs very similar to something like this. And the feedback from people have been, you know, successful. And every single person has said, wow, I didn't know that this type of career existed. I'm a, you know, electrician, but I had no idea that I could do this work in, you know, a plant setting. So again, the measurements would be the number of participants that successfully complete the program, any that are hired into full-time positions, which this is an area, again, that we're facing retirement. So it's very critical for us to build that pipeline and get people teed up. And that satisfaction with our community partners and engagement and the work we've done with the union, it's been really awesome. They're very excited to work with us on it and love the idea that we're, you know, again, targeting underserved populations. And I don't know, is John Tierney, he's also working on this. He's the manager for our mechanical maintenance. There we go. Hi, John.
John, did you want to add anything? I'm not hearing anything.
Yeah, it looks like he exited the building. So
Okay. All right, I'll turn it back to the committee. Are there any questions or thoughts, comments? Councilmember Lilligren.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Jennifer, for the report here. And I have a question that may lead to a comment, but it seems to me, Jennifer, and hopefully you can please remind me, this was a fairly small unit, right? Isn't it? Yeah. And so it seems like this, with this targeted investment, and like I said earlier, I'm hugely supportive of creating these pathways into jobs and careers. It seems like we could have some significant impact, just acknowledging the retirements on the horizon, the fact that it's a small unit, and if we put a fairly significant amount of money into creating this pathway, we could actually see some real direct impact on the demographics of this unit.
Oh,
Is that right, Jennifer? Yeah.
absolutely. Yep, absolutely. And that was one of the things that John was really, you know, wanting to see as we were talking about that, as well as the union. And I would imagine, you know, that area wouldn't decrease. And at some point, you know, we may even see the need to add additional people, but this would support us for 2 years. And we most certainly would be able to diversify that area and see a tremendous impact right away.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Anything else from the committee on this item? My question is just what's the goal? How many people ideally, you know, would you be able to, you know, impact and complete the 2-year program? Do you, maybe you mentioned that in your presentation, but how many people are we potentially talking about here?
So in talking to John, the amount of work that he has would be basically 2 people for 2 years.
Okay.
And as we're piloting it and we see, you know, any kind of changes, we could pivot. But again, it's a smaller area. The work is pretty specialized. It's not like, you know, our operations, our plant operators, we have several hundred of those. This is a smaller group, but I think, you know, considering the smaller size, 2 is probably pretty appropriate for that area. And then the actual need, and we could keep them busy and have a lot of meaningful work for them to do.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm just looking at the amount, which again, I'm very supportive, but just trying to compare that to some of the amounts that were asked on the previous item, even just for, again, that outreach and impact. So If that's what it's going to take, great. But just wanted that clarification.
Yeah, that's salary for, or basically wages for 2 years. To be able to.
Great. Cool. Thank you. All right. So we've reached the end, I believe, of the presentation. Marie, did you want to sum up, or does anybody want to kind of guide us through kind of the direction you're looking at getting from us today, and then the process that it'll take after we're done with this today?
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. So we've heard some really great ideas across the council today. We have the option of moving all of them forward. When we look at the budget, it was on my first slide, but I'll just tell you, if we take the lower range from everyone, it's 2.1 million. If we take the large range from everyone today and you move every project forward, it's ironically 3.2, which was what the levy was. Now, if you want to choose another project that you have in mind and you want to discuss, that's absolutely on the table too. But this is what the staff and management here has brought forward in 2 management committee meetings, which would be the March 23rd. We would like to come with a formal budget amendment with this and other items so that we can get this programmed into our 2022 budget. As you heard today, some folks are ready to start spending the money now. It would go to the formal council. If all of these projects were moved forward, would be April 13th, and spending could start immediately after that. So opening it up for discussion and thoughts about moving forward.
Great, thank you. All right, back to the committee members. What are your thoughts on the low end, high end, or somewhere in between? Councilmember Lilligren.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. And thanks to everyone for kind of making this happen. And this is really well thoughtful, good presentation. The one thing I would note, or one of the things I would note, is that there is no public safety proposal. And I'm not saying we should tell our departments to make pitches if they're unprepared, but I know the work of the transit police work group is kind of maturing right now. We'll see their recommendations within the time frame of approving this. And then the other big issue is recruitment of police, and there's investment being debated at the state, of course, and then the local law enforcement. And we're just in a seismic shift in policing and public safety, not just here in Minneapolis, but in the region, in the state, in the country, right? This is a major issue. And so part of me just wants to make sure that if we need it, we have enough powder dry to invest in some public safety initiatives that we're already kind of forming. And I would just note that in our region, Bloomington will have a new police chief, Minneapolis will have a new police chief, St. Paul will have a new police chief. It's likely that Metro Transit will have a new police chief, Hennepin County will have a new sheriff within a year. And so there's all this movement that's kind of hard to plan for, but I guess I'm going a long way around just saying I would like to maybe at least have the conversation either with Metro Transit, with Councilmember Chambliss, and to see if there isn't something we should be preparing for in the public safety realm within this year yet. Thanks.
So Councilmember Lilligren because I think that's an excellent point. So would you want part of our direction to be go to Councilmember Chambliss, Metro Transit, and just say, hey, have you got kind of something that's moving up a number that might be ballparking that you want to bring back for consideration at our next meeting, so that we've kind of got a placeholder for that?
That's exactly it. And then I would say, until that's done, or I guess I'm arguing not to max out the levy until we, have at least had that conversation. And and then it might be a slightly different conversation. So I don't want to say, oh, let's stay at the 2.1 and not max out the levy, because I don't feel like I'm quite fully informed to say that. But I just feel like it feels a little incomplete to not have a public safety initiative in this mix. Thanks.
Councilmember Barber, did you have something?
Yeah, just a little bit on timing. Just for the community's reference. So the police work group, their final meeting is Friday, I believe, and then they're coming to the full council with their slate of recommendations, which I anticipate will require some work by Metro Transit Police Department, as they develop action plans based on all of that. And so the timing to go back and ask the question is good, because we'll be getting information from their initial work, and as it rolls into Metro Transit Police Department, we can certainly reach out to have a conversation even at next management committee, which would still keep this item on track for approval for these projects.
Yep.
Thanks, Madam Chair. If I may, thanks, Councilmember Barber, for bringing that up, and the timing and the time frame. And I do serve on the Transit Police Work Group, and the recommendations will likely come forward with some highline sorts of values and areas, with the direction to Metro Transit and Transit Police to go back and sort of programatize these, right, and to figure that out. That's going to take resources to do that work, and so yeah, I appreciate your laying out the timeline specifically. Yeah, thanks.
And to that point, so, you know, we don't have to come up with the exact number now. My hunch is going to be that we would go to the 3.2 at the end of the day. And we just have to, depending on what we get back potentially from public safety within this timeline, others then might have to adjust, of course, downward and not hit their maximums. So, Marie, are you getting the kind of direction you need at this point, since, you know, we want to kind of have that placeholder for public safety? And then maybe if a number surfaces comes through us again, you can kind of readjust some of these numbers that you're recommending in the overall package.
Absolutely, Madam Chair and committee members, this is a great direction. What we'll do is you've already gone through all of these, so I'll summarize a slide for next meeting, put some proposed dollar amounts in there, have a quick discussion, and then we would be able to still meet our timing for the March 23rd budget amendment and move these forward for which you choose to.
Great. All right.
Thanks. And Madam Chair, if it's helpful, I would just say I support your direction. We want to maximize the levy